Hi, this is Tiffany Lorraine, the Resilient Mother, bringing to you another guest for our Mothers Shape the Future Resilient Summit. I have Ryan Kluttz here, and she's going to introduce herself and tell us what she does.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Ryan, and I am a women's marriage coach. I help women to empower themselves within the marriage and sometimes even moving on past it. Basically, we just work on getting them more of what they want in their marriage because I just see so often when we get married, we just kind of fall into the role of wife and we don't even know what that means. And so we sometimes can lose ourselves in marriage just doing for our husbands, our children, and just completely losing sight of what it is that we want in life. So that's what I help women with is to take their power back within their marriage and be able to show up as themselves and by doing that improve their marriage as well.
That's wonderful. I do think communication is definitely key with any relationship. What would you say would be a way to have resilient communication in your relationships?
I think a way to have resilient communication is to just recognize that it's never done being worked on. And
Mm,
I think that's what resiliency is in marriage in general is to know that there's there's always you're both always changing. And so there's always going to be adjustments that need to be made. And I'm not one to push marriage. If you're in a situation where the marriage needs to end, then that's just the situation that you're in. But if you're in a position where you want to work on the marriage and you want it to be, good like maybe it was at the beginning, then recognizing that communication is a constant thing to maintain
yeah, that there
is
is some
really,
work
really
involved.
important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
If you had to give advice to someone heading into relationships, and they wanted to be more resilient with the next relationship they went into, or they want to make sure to start their marriage off on the right foot, would be some key things that would help them to keep that relationship resilient as it moves forward?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that it would be making sure that you're continuing to honor your own needs, and making sure that you stay on top of your communication by learning what each other's communication styles are. That
Mm,
doesn't mean that you have to conform to the other person's, but it gives you a better understanding of why they might do whatever it is that they do versus why you do what you do because we come into this relationship to become partners but we're still individuals and so we have to learn to understand how the other person communicates so because that's what actually makes communication work. Communication isn't just talking at each other.
yeah, it's listening. Yeah, that's one
Yeah.
that I know sometimes I have to work on in relationships. I'm the talker and the extrovert and spoken, and I get going, I talk really fast, and then they're like, "Wait, your brain went here and there and there," and I'm like, "Sorry, my ADHD." But
Mhm.
that's part of who I am, and those that accept and love me as I am just know that. It's funny though. I remember a best friend one time. We were in a conversation, and she's near and dear to me, and still my best friend, and has been there for me. And she was funny though. One day she was like, "Okay, you had your turn. Now my turn to talk. I need you to listen." I was like, I appreciate that. I really appreciated it because it made me think at the time about how I need to slow down a little bit and find some other ways to also vent in a way that I wasn't dumping on somebody, that I need to go
Mhm.
work some of those things out. But I think as women, we really like to talk things out, and it's really nice to have a
Mhm.
listening ear. So are there some other ways to work things out before you approach somebody with your communication so that you're clear in your communication and your intentions and things don't get misinterpreted? Because I think they sometimes do, especially when things are heated or there's high emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a communication guide on this exact thing. So you want to make sure that you've communicated with yourself first, because if you don't even know what your objective is, what the purpose is of you going and talking to your spouse, you're coming from a place of confusion to start with. And when you come at them from a place of confusion, then they are also confused, which ends up creating a tension. You guys end up butting heads because sometimes we just want to vent, but sometimes we actually do want support in solving a problem. But if we're not clear in that going into the conversation, they might be trying to solve the problem for us when that's not really what we even want. So it is
Yeah,
important to communicate inwardly first before you go have the conversation, and to also get to a place where you know what you want to get out of the conversation too. Because sometimes we get hot-headed and we just blurt things out, or we kind of attack our spouse, and that leads to them becoming defensive, and then the conversation ends up being about who's going to win versus how can we work on this thing together, or how can you support me, or how can I support you. It becomes a battle, and I think we're so used to that battle by the things we see on TV and in the movies, and
our
it's
culture right now.
really,
Mhm.
yes, yeah, and it's so
Our
hard to
culture's horrible
remember.
right now. Yeah,
It's so polarized right now, and it's really hard to remember the whole reason why we're married and doing life together, and so that we can create something amazing. But if we're constantly at each other's throats trying to prove each other who's wrong and who's right, it just pulls us apart.
absolutely. And I think two things that stood out to me while you were talking about that are some things that I've been paying attention to more as I get ready to enter the dating scene again. And I want to, own where I made mistakes before in the past. And one of them is that men really are different from women. Like, we need
Mhm.
to talk things out. And they like to be the heroes. They want to be in that role to care and show up and solve your problem. So if you don't tell them, I just need you to listen, they are going to
Mhm.
automatically jump to wanting to solve your problem. And then
Yeah.
also, they don't take criticism really well. They really, that really can just shut them off. And I think that's why a lot of marriage counseling sometimes doesn't work if it's where there's blame and there's not equal weight in the relationship. And I also think that there are times where you got to remember you're a team, and you talked about that. You got to
Yeah.
have a vision for your relationship. You both have to have goals and aspirations that align with each other and that are headed in the same direction. And if you don't have that, it's easy to lose sight and becomes kind of selfish in the relationship. It feels like the best relationships that I've seen are when two people come together and they're completely selfless, not to the point of abuse or being taken advantage of, but the real pure love. I've seen some of these couples have been married forever that I just admire and think they're so cute. These old couples have been together forever. They've really overcome their obstacles by putting the other person first, or having a deep enough love for that person to be willing to work through it and willing to stay in it and be resilient together and be unified in what they're doing. And our culture today, there's so much to compare to. I think that's what's really killing
Mhm.
relationships is you don't have to have the Pinterest perfect life to be happy. If you
Yeah.
have beautiful, healthy relationships, you could live in a shack in the middle of nowhere and your life would be rich and full
Mhm.
and blessed. And so I think we can get caught up in the material things, and the world has become very material that way, and especially the way it presents themselves versus the value and the authenticity of relationships. Do you find that to be true, and where there's some conflict as they lose perspective about the person and there's something outside of the relationship that doesn't fit, doesn't align, and that's where the conflict comes?
Yeah, it's really hard to not compare your life to someone else's highlight reel on Instagram. You see couples traveling the world, or, maybe you've got kids and you see these couples that don't have kids, and you're, kind of like, oh, I'm changing diapers and got baby food all over me, and they're just going off and doing whatever they want. And I think in those moments, one, stop following those people if they trigger you. And two, remember that it was a choice. On some level, it was a choice to have the life that you now have. And if that choice upsets you, if you're in a place in your life that you don't love, like if your relationship is not going well, then that means that there's changes that you can make. That doesn't mean that you have to leave, that you can work on it together. And if your partner is not willing to go there, that doesn't mean that it's over. That doesn't mean that they don't care. It's just that, and this is something that I'm seeing all the time now. When you mentioned that a lot of times the marriage counseling and therapy doesn't work because one spouse, usually the husband, just feels like he's being dumped on and told on. Um, and so guys especially don't want to do therapy or couples counseling, or even sometimes they don't even want to acknowledge that things need to be changed because that reflects badly on them. Like, if you're telling me that this marriage isn't going well, that means that I'm not doing a good job. And like you said, taking criticism can be difficult for them. So they take that as a criticism, not as an opportunity to, like, let's make this better. And so it's really important, one, how you approach it with a spouse, but also there's a lot of things that you can do on your own that really have a ripple effect into the relationship itself. And that's why I actually work with women only, is because that's the empowering piece for them, to know that they can start taking care of themselves a lot better, and suddenly everything in their life improves because they just changed this one thing, which was making sure that their needs are met as well, and not just only taking care of everyone else first, which as moms is difficult to do, to allow yourself to put yourself at the top of the list for a while.
Well, and I transitioned into single mother and divorced mother, which is something I never thought I would face. I'm also a birth mother, something I didn't expect. And I've really had to learn to accept that I really have to take care of myself first, or
Mhm.
my kids' needs do not get met. And I think in past relationships, due to the trauma that I experienced, I can own that I did put the kids first, maybe to the point of not putting myself first and not putting the relationship first. And that doesn't work. You are a couple and you're united, and you do have to put that first. And I think being a mother is a little bit easier when they're younger and they just love and adore you and they're just so stinking cute. You just want to spend all the time with them.
Mhm.
And so it's important to do date nights. It's important to have the time to talk. I think the best part of my last marriage was when we actually had to commute and we were in the same car, because it forced us to have this time to regularly talk and to
Mm.
be on those goals together. And when we lost the two things that we did regularly, which were we met dancing, we stopped doing that. And when we
Mhm.
stopped having the commute and we moved somewhere else, and when we tried to up level our lifestyle without the proper preparation, among other
Mm.
things. It just all created this huge mess that eventually led to the end of the relationship. Now, I do think that relationship, um, I love my children, and I do love that they are a part of my life and how I came about them, and I honor that. But I think it's so important to have this education in relationships and understand what it takes for a marriage relationship to work, especially if you don't have the best examples in your family to follow. I know that I'm striving to be different than my family
Mhm.
and not put up
Mhm.
with certain things. And I see the pattern now of what I have attracted in my life, and I don't want that anymore. And
Yeah.
to, um, I want to find someone that complements my life, that
Mhm.
can take all of me in, that I don't compromise myself or my integrity for, because they will keep me safe and secure. I feel like those are the two things, at least for me, that I need in a relationship. Are there certain things that women really need more in a relationship versus men? Or is that something that you need to be sensitive to, is just what each individual's needs are and how to clearly communicate those?
I think needs change over time. So there's not really like a blanket. But what I am seeing a lot right now is I want they want to have more loving attention and affection and quality time, because we just spent the past 2 years. A lot of people spent a long time stuck at home, and they were
Mhm.
together, but it wasn't quality time.
Right.
And what you were saying about what you now know that you're worthy of and what you're looking for when you meet someone new, the most wonderful thing about the work that I do is helping women see that they can get that in the relationship that they're already in. That's
Mm,
one of my favorite parts, is to be able to help them start to look at things differently, and suddenly they see him differently, and suddenly he starts to behave differently, and it's like the marriage has morphed back into the way it was and what they wanted it to be, in the first place, because nobody gets married to, trudge through life and fight all the time. And so it's just really a lot about changing your perspective. And again, it kind of goes back to keeping resiliency in mind, and keeping in mind that we're going to change, and it's about how are we going to stay resilient? How are we going to adapt to these changes? My husband and I, we will come up on our 15-year anniversary on the 10th, and
congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, and so it's just like, I am neither one of us is anywhere near the same person that we were when we got married 15 years ago. So much has changed. Um, and it comes with life changes, having kids, changing careers, moving, all of those things create changes in us, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. And so it's almost like accepting the fact that things change and that we change helps you to be more adaptable to those things. And rather than saying, oh, well, you're different now, I can't relate to you, so I don't want to be with you. It's more
Well,
about
I'm
like,
gonna go find it
okay,
somewhere else, I think is the thing that's driving me
yeah,
absolutely nuts is that I'm seeing this pattern of like, I don't know,
you've
men like
changed.
having children with a woman, ditching the woman with children and going and finding some younger model. Like somehow that's
Hmm.
better in some cases. That's not in every case. But I'm also seeing just the idea that I can find better somewhere else is definitely a mindset that is unfortunately
Yeah.
very detrimental because that's not really showing any level of real commitment to find out what it would really be like to stick it out and to be in there. And I love what you're saying because there's way too much divorce, and I think that is the thing. Is I think people are looking for solutions, and but there
Hmm.
is a fine line there too, where there's abuse, there's trauma, where
Oh
things are
yeah.
not working. I know that in my relationship, we had childhood trauma and we kept triggering each other. And as much as we tried not to, we just constantly triggered each other. And it became very unhealthy and it wasn't good for
Yeah.
anyone. And there wasn't a lot it seemed like we could do about it. So, not that I am pro divorce. I would love for people to stay together. It's so much better for the children, especially because they become the collateral damage, whether you like it or not. And they didn't do
Hmm.
anything wrong. And it's very hard to be raised in a single parent household and have the healthy relationships that you need. It's possible to fill those roles and give room for that, but it's just much more difficult. It would be so much better if parents could work it out and stay together. But what is that line that you know it's over? Is it when the other person isn't willing to work anymore? Is you don't want to wait till it is abusive. You don't want to
Right.
wait till the first time you get hit. You don't want to wait until it's become detrimental to everyone.
Yeah. I Can you hear me?
There I am. Um,
Okay. Now you're there. I can hear you now. Oh, there you are. Okay.
there we go. Sorry.
Um, no, no, it's fine. I just wanted to make sure that I could hear and see you again. So I think, a lot of times people, when it comes to a physical abuse, especially, there aren't always signs um, before it happens. So I
Mm,
would say if you're in any kind of physical abuse, especially, find a way to get yourself out, and don't kid yourself into thinking, oh, it was just a one time thing. It's no big deal. He said he was sorry. It's, if they're willing to put their hands on you for whatever reason that they thought that should be done, it's not okay. Um, and then speaking about a relationship that's just over, that doesn't involve abuse, I think, and this is actually, this has happened with one of my clients. When we first started working together, she wanted to make sure that she had done everything in her power,
mhm.
so to make it work. But
Yeah.
what ended up happening was she realized, I've done everything in my power, and now I see that there's nothing left for me to do and that this marriage is complete. And it gave her the peace to be able to go ahead and get divorced and move on. And now she's in a beautiful relationship, because she learned that, okay, here's what I want, here's what I don't want. He's not coming with me. She's kind of, it's not that we elevate past someone, but she had moved into a different sort of consciousness. And she did all that she could, and the relationship just was at an end.
Yeah.
And I think once you realize, it's almost like it's like that, like you said, a fine line. I want my clients to understand the value in knowing that they would be fine without their partner. Because if you're in a place of, I need this person completes me, Jerry Maguire stuff is just totally off base. But if you have to be able to get yourself to a place where you're feeling like, if this person leaves me tomorrow, I will be okay. And that attitude is actually what usually makes the marriage work so much better, because you're not so attached and like, codependent, white knuckling your relationship. Because, all of us have been in a situation where, or well, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us has been in a situation where someone, a boyfriend, girlfriend, or even a friend or an acquaintance gets too clingy, and it makes you back off. And so when you bring that clingy energy into your marriage, it has the same exact effect, even if the other person can't articulate that and doesn't really know what it is that they're feeling, why they're feeling, like you're repulsive.
Yeah.
But it's there. And so we have to be able to make sure that I'm amazing all by myself. You are my cherry on top. I'm enjoying doing life with you, but if something happened, I know that I would be okay. And then when you get to that point, sometimes people find, I think I'd rather be okay without this person than with them. I think that, maybe we're on two different paths, and that's okay. It's just, I agree with you that I think a lot of marriages outside of abuse and addiction and stuff like that, I think a lot of marriages could easily be saved if they knew what they could do, like what they had the power to do. Because people tend to look at the problem, and they do want to fix it, but they're so focused on the problem that they can't see a solution. And so that's when I swoop in with the solution.
Yes. There does have to be communication, and and you've got to not be in a situation where you're like ghosted, narcissist. I mean, there's different forms of abuse. In one of my other interviews, we really go into the different forms of abuse and where that line is. We both left relationships that were abusive in different ways. Physical is a very easy one to see, whereas the other ones are very different and controlling and manipulative, and they're a lot. The outside doesn't see them, which makes it even harder to leave. Not everyone knows something is wrong. And I'm sure you see most of that. But I love the work that you're doing, and that it's helping couples realize that there's a lot of tools, that there is work, but it's all doable. And you can get back to what you had in the beginning. You wouldn't be together in the first place if you didn't have something beautiful that was in the beginning of the relationship that drew you together. And that spark and that light can still be there when you want to find it. And so thank you so much for joining me. I believe that you have an offer for our audience, and I'd like you to share with us how they can get a hold of you and take advantage of this wonderful work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a free coaching group for wives. It's in my little name here. That's the website to go join there. And when you join, you can get a free communication guide. What I mentioned a little while ago about the steps to make sure that you're communicating with yourself before you've communicated with your spouse. And I also have a free boundaries worksheet on my website. It's at marriedandmanifesting.com/boundaries. So it's just a worksheet that can help you recognize who do you need to set the boundaries with, because it's not always your spouse. A lot of times it's in-laws or children. And why do you want to set the boundary? What will you do if the boundary is broken? And it kind of just helps make everything a lot clearer when you're confronted with this person who is continuously stepping over your boundaries, where sometimes we know we need to set boundaries, but we're just like, I don't even know what that means. I just know that I don't like what they're doing and I want it to stop. So those are my two things that you can grab for free. And I would love to support anyone who is feeling like they want their marriage to be better, but they just don't know how. I've had countless women tell me they've tried everything. Um, and I just want to say that you haven't tried working with me yet. So give that a
Yay!
try too.
Amen to that. Because yes, you do have to leave with a sense of peace. I remember someone who gave
Hmm.
me the best advice when I was facing that decision, which was very difficult, especially with young children. And it
Yeah.
was, it's going to be hard to leave. It's going to be hard to stay. Whatever decision you make, let's make sure you have peace with it. And that was
Hmm.
the best advice that I was ever given. And it's served me very well. And I would like to have had a different ending, but it is what it is. And now you just got to make the most of what's given to you and move forward. And that's what resilience is all
Yeah.
about. And you do have to put
Yes.
the whole person first to attract the right person. And that's the
Exactly.
work that I get to do now and have the opportunity to do. And I get to do it with my kids. So that's just my story.
Yeah. And a helicopter just went by, and I'm not sure if you could hear it or not, but I always get nervous even though I have my thing on that's supposed to drown it out.
We had a train earlier and we had to start a little later. So, hey,
Yeah.
that's just part being resilient. We're going to just bounce with the punches. And so
Yeah.
it sounds like you could not only help people that are in marriage, but it sounds like you would also be helpful in like premarital counseling, I think, too. Do you do any of that? Because it sounds like you'd be helpful there.
Am absolutely open to that. My messaging is for wives, but I do have some brides in my group, and I would love it if someone who is heading into marriage wanted support, because that's where you can build the most amazing foundation so that you don't get to a point where you're wondering what happened. We used to be so happy. I don't understand how we got to this place. I mean, how you got to that place is by neglecting your marriage. Like that's the short story. There's usually a ton more involved than just that. But like, if I would love to support anyone who's heading into marriage and has the awareness that this is something that we should work on now, so that when we hit those tough times, we're not against each other, but we're falling into each other.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Because yeah, because there's gonna be challenges. There's no way around that. But if
The
you have
falling into
these,
each other instead of falling
yeah,
away from each other. That's so
yeah,
beautiful. I love that so much because there are going to be the
yeah,
falls, and we should be there to catch each other and lift each other up. I think that's a beautiful way of putting how a marriage relationship is meant to be. Oh, that's
yeah,
just beautiful.
yeah, working together instead of apart. And yeah, the falling into each other, I think, is so important, because it's not codependency. You're not depending on the other person to be able to be a human on your own. But when you face tough times, you want to be able to go to that person and ask for support, or allow them to lift you up. So it's just really important. And I'm so passionate about people doing this ahead of time, but a lot of times people who don't need it yet don't want to talk about it yet. So it can
Well, as
be.
someone coming from the divorce realm, I've seen the only couples that I've seen really do well after divorce did marital counseling first so that
Yeah.
they could work that stuff out. And I think if more
Hmm.
couples would realize that they need that going into marriage, just to know what they're getting themselves into with everything that you bring, and you have that right up front at the beginning, it's exactly what you said. Then you already know what you're in for, and there's not surprises that throw the relationship off because you know where you're going to need to do more work to make things
Yeah.
work. I think it would prevent marriages from falling apart where people jump in a little too soon or aren't
Hmm.
quite authentic and honest with each other. If you're in therapy together, stuff's going to come out, or there's going to be patterns that are seen, and then you're going to know if you can handle it or not, I think. So, yeah, I love this. And that way, this applies to everyone who's here. We've got an audience that I
Yeah. Oh
believe will
yeah.
be a mix of married and single. I'm not exactly sure. Everybody that's coming is wonderful and has a different audience, but all mothers are welcome here to this advice on being resilient. I think we've hit some wonderful key points about communication, being honest with yourself, showing up and knowing yourself first, being able to be independent, not codependent in a relationship. Those are the things that'll help it be resilient and thrive, and having a vision together of what you're working towards. Sounds like those are the things that we've taken from this session today. And now we get to have a little fun, and we're a little over time, but I don't care. We're going to dance because all of the speakers are dancing with me. And the audience is going to decide who is the best dancer, and we're going to give that speaker a prize. So that's just my spin on all of this. So I'm going to go here, and we'll wrap up that way. So. Now I'm in a smaller box,
come
so
here.
I've got some smaller moves.
Give me just a second. Come here, Lou. Come here.
All right, I'll get him started.
She has to. She has to dance. She has to dance with me.
Oh my God! It's okay. You have a dance partner.
You can't hear the music, can you? Oh, she's like, Mom, what are you doing to me?
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us, and please go reach out to her. I think we've hit some wonderful points here on how to have thriving, resilient relationships and marriages, which is so important to mothers and families. And we will see you around at the next session and interview. Thank you for joining.